So we're back to that bubble then.
Yeah.
So how do we? Well, we answered some of how we do it. Are billboards effective? Is that part of your? I mean, do you have enough money to?
Oh gosh, no. We're about as grassroots as it gets, Patrick.
Right.
No, you know, we really wish that there was more social marketing directed towards women, for sure. I think our county is doing a better job with some of the youth initiatives.
Yeah.
And definitely within the MSM and Have Sex with Men community. But if you want to look at women, no, it's not there. I mean, I will say that our county partnered with a CDC-funded project called Project SMART, which is based, it's a national program that's based here in San Diego. And for the first time ever in San Diego's history, in 2008, there was a campaign for women who are positive to get them into care. I mean, it's just amazing. You know, we have those posters, and our outreach staff went and, you know, blasted them all over San Diego. And we actually had a number of women call in who were positive, who were not in care. Because, you know, they just said this doesn't happen, you know, in denial, shame, fear, guilt, you know, all of it. Many women were worried that their children would be taken away from them, that people found out that they were HIV positive. You know, so getting back to all of the stigma stuff. So I think definitely, you know, for some of the organizations, you know, that do the really innovative work, you know, the folks I think that are, you know, many times the agencies that are doing really innovative approaches are agencies, you know, like Brian and you know, like Operation Samahan and Christie's Place. We have very small operating budgets. We are on the margins of the HIV funding.
Can you tell us what that is? What small is?
Small is, you know, our operating budget at Christie's Place is about $700,000 a year. So, you know, for San Diego, that's fairly small in terms of what the number of services we provide. You know, we provide over 20 different social services in addition to all of the education that we do, and in addition to all the advocacy and social activism work that we do. So we have a very, you know, it's literally a shoestring budget. I mean, there are times when you're going month to month, we're going to be able to pay the rent kind of thing. So, you know, for us, there is no PR budget. There is no budget to do any kind of marketing or, you know, any of that stuff. There's no money for it.
Are you constrained because of the money that you receive? But are you constrained? There's some things that you cannot say or do or be a part of as a condition of your grant or
well,
gift?
you know, we can't do any kind of lobbying of elected officials. You know, we are lucky enough that we do get some Ryan White funding through the County of San Diego. We are their sole contractor to provide women, children, and family services under the Ryan White Part A. And then the rest of the money is raised through foundations and stuff, and all of that is directed to direct, you know, program operating expenses. You know, we are lucky that, you know, we have always been a social activism organization, so we've been able to maintain that. It's just not being able to directly lobby any elected officials. But, you know, I've been to the State Office of AIDS, I've been to DC, I've been to the CDC. You know, we're also part of a small collective called the National Women AIDS Collective, and we're focused on making women a priority in our country because, you know, when there are drafts of this new national AIDS strategy, women were not mentioned at all, which to me is a travesty, especially when you're looking at some of the regions in our country where women are hit so hard, like the South. And as well as border regions like San Diego, you know, we share the world's, internationally, Tijuana is the busiest border. You know, there's 40 million crossings a year. So the epidemic is just exacerbated by that, in addition to, you know, and it also complicates service provision. So here in San Diego, we have an extremely large percentage of Hispanic individuals that are HIV positive, and many of which who are not in care. So anyway, again...
Well, with that, too, does that... Hispanic women being positive, does that open up another door of stigma that they can't even begin to discuss with family and church and those kinds of things? And it seems like that would really make your job that much harder, and the people that you could be serving may not darken your door.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Absolutely. Culturally, and, you know, within that culture, you know, I've learned a lot living in San Diego, being from the East Coast, you know, and San Diego being exposed to more of the Mexican American culture versus back east, where, you know, it's a little bit, the dynamics a little bit different within the Latino community. But there, you know, the role that the Catholic Church plays,
right,
or doesn't play. The issue, the gender inequalities in the relationships. You know, most of the women that we work with, you know, they have sex to procreate. It is not something pleasurable. Many of the women that we work with have never had an orgasm. They never even looked at their vaginas.
right.
So when you talk about sexual health, I mean, they're literally seen as a vessel, a childbearing vessel.
Right.
You know, and then their husband or boyfriend goes out, you know, sort of the Latina woman, she's sort of the wife is sort of the cathedral, if you will. You know, she's on this pedestal and there's no oral sex, you know, it's simply, you know, missionary style procreating. She stays home, she cooks, she cleans, dinner is ready, there's no questioning the man. And then he gets his sexual needs met outside of that, the little chapels.
Right.
To use that analogy. And so maybe it's, you know, sex with another man, maybe it's sex with multiple women, you know, whatever it might be. And then, you know, comes back home to that cathedral. So for many of the women, you know, they can't even come to Christie's place because they can't leave the house. There's also the fear of their immigration status, you know, if they're undocumented. So that's another very, very huge issue here in San Diego. You know, we've got Border Patrol that goes on the buses and they'll just do raids.
Yeah.
And they'll pull people off buses, separate families. And I don't want to get into a whole debate about immigration issues,
Right.
but you know, it's a very, very real issue.
Yeah, I don't
here,
think
and I know you work with lots of.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah, you can't deny this cultural component, and you've got to learn how to address your services and kind of put yourself out there to allow them to feel comfortable getting your services. You know, you need to understand where they're coming from, and that's really important. You were talking about restricted about things like that, and I think that's the really big restriction when it comes to something like HIV funding is you get some money and they say, okay, you can choose these kind of strategies to use it because they're proven effective. And that's wonderful, but what was proven effective maybe in, you know, New York City somewhere is very different than what's going to be effective in San Diego, but yet I have to choose this kind of strategy. So I think that limits it because you're denied the ability to kind of, you know, individualize your interventions and how you speak to people. I think California is really great because they deny abstinence-only money, so we don't, you know, we're not allowed to just say, you know, don't use condom. You know, we have to promote comprehensive sex education. You know, they got to know all their options, but we still are limited by the funding cycles, and they say, okay, you can only choose these 15 strategies, and you got to make it work for your community. And my community is not the same as their community. It's not the same as anyone else's communities. You know, even as much as Liz and I do similar work, our communities are different. And she's going to develop something that's right for her kid, you know, her youth and her families, and all, you know, all the people she helps. I'm going to do something that's right. But when you have this funding, you're kind of you're stuck in this little box, and that can be a challenge sometimes. It's trying to, you know, just tweak it a little bit to make it work, but still make it individualized and put that cultural component in there. And it can be a challenge. It makes work for, like, you know, developing our programs and kind of run and managing it. It makes it a little bit more challenging for us. Yeah.
It's that double-edged sword.
Right.
You need the money to be able to deliver these services that are so desperately needed, yet the way in which you would prefer to deliver, you know, the challenges around how you can deliver them.
Right.
So summer of 2009, $52 million was cut from it. And
Okay.
essentially, you know, here in San Diego, pretty much all of our prevention dollars went away.
Right.
So contracts were just had to be terminated because there was no funding to maintain them. Counseling and testing, you know, a big percentage of that funding was cut, and those services are not as available as they once were in San Diego. So, you know, it doesn't make any sense to me that, you know, over 25 years in this epidemic that you're going to, or the first thing you're going to take away is counseling and testing and prevention.
Right.
You know, that doesn't, you know, make any sense. So in terms of a total dollar amount, you know, I don't have that, but, you know, I do know how much we've lost.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think California has always been kind of one of the leaders in this kind of, you know, HIV services, and really kind of, I mean, when HIV first came out, you know, San Francisco was the place to go to for this, you know, information. And so we've always been the leader, and now it's just with this budget crisis, it was, I mean, it's almost decimated. You know, $52 million really cut San Diego's HIV services to nothing. You know, people not only lost their jobs, but there's people that have nowhere to go for resources. You know, we are looking at these, you know, I'm sure Liz is as well, these small little grants. You're looking at $10,000 to help support your program. You're trying to write grants all over just to kind of combine these monies to make something larger, where before you had a little bit more leeway. You could just write maybe 2 or 3 grants and get your budget. Now you're looking at 10 to 20 grants to just maintain staff so you can provide these services, let alone get more supplies or do some remodeling to the toilets that's broken or something. So it's really challenging. It's really trying to find those creative ways to make your program fit into some funding source, and looking after federal dollars now, not just state dollars, and maybe looking at these smaller foundations and kind of smoozing with these big wigs to say, look, give me your money. And it's really trying to find these unique ways to get these monies out there.
So you have to do that. You have to go to the wine and cheeses and
absolutely.
And you're
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so your budget is roughly $700. What's your budget?
Well, my youth center budget overall is about $250,000 a year.
Okay, so everything. If you in a perfect world, what do you need?
In a perfect world, I need at least $1 million.
Yeah. So you need an extra $300,000, and
I would say to really do the work that I'd like to see us do, I would like to increase it to probably about $500,000, $500,000. I think would be an ideal budget for my youth program. Absolutely.
So we need $550,000 at this time for these 2 programs. Okay. I said, well, you don't put it out there.
Absolutely.
You never
right.
Put it out there.
You never know.
And that would give you. I mean, you would still work as hard as you're working, but
of course.
It would give you the means to serve more people, or
absolutely,
and to make your messages stick.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because we're limited. You get all these requests in the community to provide services and to go places, and you're like, you got to pick and choose. Well, we can't really do that one because I can't afford to pay you the extra 5 hours to go sit at that booth, or I can't really afford. People want us to bring HIV testing services to them. I'm like, well, how am I going to pay for the test? How am I going to pay for transporting staff out there? It's those little things that we'd love to do, but we just can't. We got to, really choose where we provide these services and what we do.
And providing those services and choosing, you're saying that it'll allow you to have the bigger bang down the road. It allows you to have more visibility down the road. So is that the way you choose?
All of that, yeah. And just there's people that will not receive services because we can't reach them. We can't get to them. We can't design these intervention strategies towards a certain community or certain people because we don't have the money for it. We get money for, say, like a Hispanic, a young Hispanic women's program. Well, what about the African American women? What about the Asian Pacific Islander women? There's all these things that we can't do it because our funding doesn't allow that. So it's just being able to kind of reach out and provide services for everybody, because this is not just a problem for one specific community. Right. It's everybody, and we can't reach everybody. Unfortunately, we have to kind of design it really focused, and it's a challenge.
We're hitting politics now. Where are we? Are you guys? Do you have to muzzle yourselves in order to keep your money, or are you allowed to speak out and really be advocates for Christie's Place and Youth to Youth?
I can say in the beginning, I had to wear a muzzle, but now, I definitely have more freedom, if you will, to be a very strong advocate. Part of the challenge, I'm on the HIV Planning Council, which is the body that directs what services will be funded with Ryan-wide dollars and at what amount. And because I am a provider of women, children, and family services, and even though I'm an expert, in that particular area, I cannot engage in any conversation about that category when it comes time for the budget process. So it's almost, it's challenging because the way that the Ryan-White legislation is if you have a conflict of interest. So because my agency gets the money for that line item in the budget, for women, children, and family services, I cannot discuss it, nor can anybody that's affiliated with the organization, because it could be seen as potential gain.
Right.
So what happens is there's so few of us doing work with women that all of us share the same pot of money, so to speak. So I'll subcontract out a little piece of my grant to, let's say, UCSD, who does a lot of work with children and perinatal HIV, and so maybe they'll do some counseling for children's therapy. But anybody that gets even $1 of that money is conflicted. And so all of the experts that really sort of have our fingers on the pulse of what's going on with women in HIV in San Diego are not allowed to participate in those discussions and in those decisions. So we are somewhat limited. However,